slideshow.
Okay. So I'm going to just do a moment of introduction. I'm thrilled to be sitting in on this panel. This is a group from Chicago Public Schools that was created in the fall of 2020 with stakeholders from the central office, and you'll get to meet them, the network and the school, and they included the chief of staff, the chief of schools, the data strategist, instructional support leaders, and socio-emotional learning specialists, and equity achievement specialists, and elementary principals. And they came to one of the clinics that we offered in the fall, and have been doing like this great work ever since. So we're excited. I'm excited personally to hear more about it, and excited to be sharing that with the other folks who have been able to join us for now. Do you want to, should I introduce you individually, or you want to step up and introduce yourselves? Yeah, Anita, go. Any way you all want to do it is great with us.
Okay.
Okay, can everyone see the screen? Yep. Okay, great. Well, we will get started then. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Beth Brown, and I am the Equity Achievement Specialist with the Office of Equity in Chicago Public Schools. I'm joined today by an amazing team of leaders from our district, and they will each introduce themselves throughout our presentation. And we're really grateful to be here and in community with all of you this afternoon. Our session is Real Talk, who's not doing the learning in your system. And during our time together, we will share our team's experience and journey around professional learning and capacity building to support equity work in our schools and across our district. We'd like to take a moment to find out who's in the room with us today. So if you could please drop into the chat your name, organization, and position, and then what's the best team you've been on and why? Welcome, Angela. As the rest of the group is working on answering those questions, I will take us through our agenda and objectives. Thanks so much for sharing in the chat. Our objective for this session is to focus on the conditions to build individual and team capacity while supporting systemic change. And we will start off with this welcome and introduction, then we'll move into a little bit more details about our Network 6 equity team. Talk about our journey, and then end with the impact that our team has had both on our own personal growth and in relationship to the larger group of school administrators that we work with. Again, thanks so much for sharing in the chat your names and what you do, as well as the teams that you have been on, the best teams that you've been on. The norms that we hold on our team come from Courageous Conversations from Singleton and Linton. And we offer these for this space and time together today. They include stay engaged or be present in the space during our time together, experience discomfort. We know oftentimes it is challenging to talk about race and equity. And so we ask that you embrace that discomfort, speak your truth, or be honest and open about your thoughts and feelings, and then expect and accept non-closure, which although can be challenging, this norm asks us to be okay with uncertainty and ongoing conversation around this work. So we want to move into the core part of our session by asking just a few questions. First, to get to know you a little bit more and know about kind of how you are as an individual learner, in addition to shedding some light on your beliefs and thoughts about teams. So if you could take just a moment to share in the chat the letter of your response. In the last week, what percentage of the meetings you've attended have focused on your personal growth as an anti-racist leader? I'm seeing quite a few A's, 0 to 25%, a C and a B. So it looks like most in the room are somewhere between 0 to 25 or 26 to 50. Now, if you could, please share the letter of what is one obstacle that interferes with your personal growth as an anti-racist leader? Seeing a bit of a range here with several who are identifying many competing priorities as an obstacle that interferes with this type of learning. Then finally, if you could take a minute to think about these two questions. Who should be on an equity team? And what is the goal or purpose of an equity team? So again, if you could just take a minute to think about those two questions and respond to one of them in the chat, and I will lift some of those responses into our space. Great. Looks like a wide range of stakeholders, including students, should make up an equity team. Anyone who wants to, but a representative from all stakeholder communities. All stakeholders. Cross-functional representatives. The purpose or goal to create space for intentional planning and reflection on equity and inequity in a system. Great. I encourage you to please keep sharing in the chat, and we will continue to lift responses and share them out throughout our presentation. We're going to now share a little bit more about our team and how our journey together unfolded and helped inform our purpose and our goals and our learning as individuals and a team.
Thank you, Beth. Good afternoon. My name is Nikki Milberg. I'm the Chief of Network 6, and I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. We wanted to kick off by sharing a glimpse into our equity team at work. As an opener in one of our monthly team meetings, we utilized an application that allowed us to reflect on the diversity of our own universe. This video highlights our team reflection after independently completing the survey. You can go ahead and play the video, please, Beth. Beth, there's no volume right now.
Choices and you know, when we were younger, there wasn't as much choice involved, right? But as we get older, we get more intentional with our choices.
I'm having trouble hearing. I don't know if anyone else is.
We are.
I'm wondering if you can make it bigger and also adjust the sound.
You might want to reshare the screen, and there's a button you can select that says share sound.
Thank you for all your tidbits of everybody's experience over this past year on online
Oh,
everything.
yes. Sorry about that, everyone.
You know, when we were younger, there wasn't as much choice involved, right? But as we get older, we can be more intentional with our choices, and I know that kind of put me in the thinking quadrant.
For that. And so some of the questions are, why does my grid look like this? And some of these choices I did make intentionally. Why did I make those choices? You know, what does that say about how I show up and my perspective, my stance in anti-racism? What does it say about how I showed up? And so when I thought about that, I thought about like the area where I live. I intentionally chose to not be in the deep west side of Chicago, even though that's where I grew up. I intentionally did not want to be there and did not want to bring my son up there. But I didn't view it as being racist at the time. And then how do you be racist against your own race? You know,
Do we think if your world or your scope looks all one way, and whatever that way is, but I don't know, maybe in this context, all white, especially for those of us who are white, does that automatically reflect racism, or does it just inform our thinking around how we show up to do anti-racist work?
Looking at the picture, and I saw like my neighborhood now, I would categorize it as mostly white neighborhood in Andersonville. And then I felt guilt for that. So what you said like hits me. And then I started thinking about like, why did we move here? Why do we move into this neighborhood? And I
challenge sometimes if we're trying to talk explicitly about growth and anti-racist work. Well, maybe y'all don't know this, but that I've had an experience before of like feeling like I'm on Saturday Night Live talking about, oh, but I have a Black friend. I know somebody who's, you know, like this kind of thing. And I'm like, wait, is this like a serious conversation? Like, you know, and I thought of that doing this, like, if one were to do this, like, oh yeah, I got a Black mayor, I got a Black CEO, I got you know, I have representation in my life. And it made me think the word representation, I've experienced it being representation is important, so that lived experience and perspective of the individual is then represented in decision-making, in, you know, whatever. And in the conversation, I was hearing it being used as like representation, like, look, we check that box. This is a diverse group because look at us, right? Like representation literally meant like representing, like showing up.
This world where different folks are representative, but it's like, how are you engaging? And I think to both Meredith and Brennan's points, like, how are you engaging with people who are different than you and who have had different lived experiences than you have had? And it makes me then further connect to our inclusive partnerships kind of dimension of the framework, and how are we bringing in people who have differences in lived experiences, and particularly people who are furthest from like opportunities in our worlds.
Thank you. So Chicago Public Schools created a new vision, a new 5-year vision in 2019. This was the first time equity work was elevated as a driver for all the work we engage in across the district. We as a team here in Network 6 experienced the same challenges that were shared earlier in this session regarding time for personal growth and obstacles in the way of this work. But with the commitment of the district and the urgency of this work in our network, we dedicated ourselves to determine how we could work as a network to better support our school leaders to be better prepared as anti-racist leaders. Network 6 is made up of 21 Chicago public elementary schools, serving an extremely diverse population across many neighborhoods of approximately 9,000 students in grades pre-K through 8. In our Network 6 equity team last year, if you can go to the next slide, please. So here are the representatives of our Network 6 equity team. We created this team to help drive the work and better support our leaders. We work to include multiple stakeholders, as many of you mentioned, on our equity team, including a diverse group of network staff that support schools in different ways. We included principals and district leaders to ensure alignment across different parts of the organization. And as we thought about this team, I think this was the first time we really worked to have a multi-level group. And I don't know if you can go back a slide so we can see people in our group. But I think some feedback that was shared in the chat and some things that we've been thinking about still moving forward is, as we continue this work, who do we still need to include on our equity team? So we are really including particularly the voices of students and families that we're serving. So thank you. If you can go on to the next slide. Here's a snapshot of what our work looks like as an equity team and the work for our school leaders. Our equity team applied for the Harvard Rides Clinic. Over the summer, 80% of our school leaders elected to participate in optional book clubs focused on anti-racist school leadership, and they were run by school leaders. In the fall, our equity team attended the Rides Conference, and our school leaders created equity goals and joined professional learning communities with other leaders with similar goals. Our equity team quickly realized that in order to support school leaders with equity work, we needed to commit more time to examine our own mindsets and develop our skills as anti-racist educators. We created a team structure where we met 2 times a month, one meeting focused on our own learning and another meeting to plan and debrief school leader sessions. We then led monthly school leader equity sessions with 2 parts. One part focused on supporting the adult mindset to lead staff in anti-racist educational practices, and another part with professional learning communities to support learning focused on school-identified equity goals, such as growth for English language learners or African American male math achievement.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Nadavati. I'm the Social Emotional Learning Specialist for Network 6. Now we're going to jump into how our journey started versus how it's going. We started this process by looking at the overall data from our network of schools. From this data, we recognized that there were inequitable practices in place which negatively impacted our Black students. Our initial goal when applying for the Rides Clinic was focused on addressing school-wide and classroom practices that were negatively impacted our Black students. You can see here that we highlighted some of the key words in this first draft to identify where we thought our process was at the time. During our work in the RIDES clinic, we realized that what we believed to be the best approach for students needed to be shifted. We recognized that we need to address our own biases and triggers in order to be prepared to adjust school-wide and classroom practices. The work started within us and our leaders. We needed to take responsibility for what we carried with us into our schools. Again, we highlighted some of the key words in our current goal to help show the shift from the beginning of our work to now. During the RIDES clinic, our team worked through a variety of activities and protocols, which were structured to help us dive deeper into the purpose and focus of the work. It was through these activities that we came to truly recognize what we needed to work on: our personal and team equity culture, liberatory thinking, and adult mindset. During the ABCDs protocol, we reflected on structures in place in our schools, network, and district, and how they measure up to our expectation of equity. At the end of this, we determined several things that needed to be incorporated into our work. An improved sense of belonging by inviting the students into the process because we know their voice matters. Focusing on long-term change to create sustainable, equitable practices, and making sure that there is room at the table for those who are furthest away from opportunities. Some additional work included the ethos and the 4 I's of racism and oppression. As we learned and reflected on the ethos, it was clear that this was how we were going to incorporate our equity work throughout all of our practices and supports for schools. Deliberately practicing the skills that develop ethos is something we now use to incorporate our equity lens throughout all practices and conversations. The 4 I's of racism and oppression allowed us to analyze and reflect on current systematic practices that we needed to counteract and address. During this work, we recognized that our team kept coming back to ideology and asking, where do we get our beliefs from? And how these personal beliefs influenced our liberatory thinking and mindsets as adults. Combined with the activities I just spoke about, we wanted to make sure to ground our work in measurable data, which we could use to progress monitor our growth as a team and as a network. In order to do this, we decided to use the personal and team equity culture self-assessment. We decided to start by assessing our equity team's baseline, as well as our interpretation of the baseline within our network of schools. This first assessment showed us that we identified the area of need as taking a hard look at your own biases and triggers for both the equity team and our network of schools. This data, combined with the work I've already spoken about, is how we decided to adjust our team goal. Our focus would now be on addressing and recognizing our own biases and triggers through the work on adult mindset and liberatory thinking. Once we had completed the personal and team equity culture self-assessment and determined our area of growth, it was important that we truly understood the root cause of this need. In order to do this, we used the 5 Whys root cause analysis protocol. This activity really was a turning point for our team. It was one of the first times where we really put ourselves out there and brainstormed around why speaking about biases and triggers were so difficult for us as individuals. This not only increased the trust between us as a team, but opened the door to further discussions on how biases and triggers impact who we are and what we bring into the work with us.
Good afternoon. My name is Brennan Humphrey, and I'm an instructional support leader in Network 6. Sorry, we were having a little technology difficulties earlier. Since our team engaged in the October Intensive RIDES Clinic in October, we have planned and engaged in multiple short-term equity improvement cycles that all work towards our vision for equity improvement that Kirsten just shared about. Each of these cycles developed our personal and team equity culture. They were built upon previous cycles of learning. They were grounded in both quantitative and qualitative data. They required our team to engage deeply in the learning. And then finally, they informed how we planned learning for our school leaders. To share a glimpse into these short-term equity improvement cycles, we're going to go deep on just one of them. As Kirsten shared earlier, we were introduced to the ethos of embracing anti-racism by Dr. Dernisha Amante at the RIDES Clinic back in October. We then introduced this idea to Network 6 school leaders in December. As we moved to step 2 of the equity improvement cycle, we gathered self-assessment data around the inputs or skills to develop and create this ethos within schools. Our equity team reviewed the data on this slide and identified that our top 2 areas of growth we're leaning into discomfort and engaging in humble inquiry. Moving to our next slide, we move to step 3 of the cycle, diagnosing underlying causes of any gaps between our vision and our current reality. We engaged in another 5 whys analysis to better understand why leaning into discomfort and engaging in humble inquiry were our top 2 areas of growth. As we engaged in this analysis, we identified an actionable root cause that we actually needed time to practice these skills while building more relational trust to mitigate some of the fears that might be underlying why we're not practicing these skills on a regular basis. Moving to step 4 of the cycle, we planned learning opportunities to practice the skills of leaning into discomfort and engaging in humble inquiry. We did this by creating scenarios that were relevant to the context of our schools that we would use in role plays, so that we were truly practicing the skills rather than just simply talking about them. On this slide, you'll see one of the scenarios that we created about our teacher team meeting where dehumanizing language was used to describe students as the team discussed a data metric that we use in Chicago Public Schools called On Track, which includes grades and attendance data. I'd like everybody just to take a moment to read this scenario and think about what comes up for you as you read this, and drop your thoughts in the chat. Thanks, Cersei, for getting us started. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So much of what I'm seeing in the chat were questions that we were asking ourselves. And this language in this, whether it's at risk, broken home, there's no initiative. These were words we were hearing all too often in our schools and oftentimes not confronted or addressed. We'll go to the next slide. This is a second part of the scenario where the first part was about a teacher team. This is about preparing a school leader to have a one-on-one conversation with a particular teacher from that scenario. We created a data set that mirrored some of the achievement differences that we see in our schools. And leaders were able to look at the data and think about how might they have a conversation and then actually have a conversation. So this was the planning step. Moving to the next, step 5 of the equity improvement cycle, acting. As an equity team, we engaged in this role play that I just shared with you in partners. One person was the principal, the other person was a teacher.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anita Brown. I'm also an instructional support leader with Network 6, and I'm going to continue with step 6. So after we engaged in the role play in partners, we came back together as an equity team and debriefed the role play. Then we shifted our conversation to step 6, reflect, assess impacts of processes of work, and then plan next improvements. As our team engaged in the equity improvement cycles, we were also preparing for the cycles with the principals and assistant principals at our 21 schools. And through our debrief, we considered our own learning experience as we planned for the principal's learning experience and what was right for the school leaders. And if we needed to make some changes, how could we make it so that it was the most impactful towards our vision for equity improvement? So to give you a glimpse at how that landed, we're going to show you a video of the conversation with our team on the next slide.
Would have changed the question, and that would have kind of sparked some thinking, looking at reflection. How am I, what am I noticing about students who are failing, and how am I showing up to support them? And maybe that's what teacher 3 did in that quick reflection in a meeting.
A statement that jumps out to me is they say they just don't have any initiative or the support at home. So that really speaks to the teacher's mindset. So there's a mindset issue that needs to be dealt with even before you can change grading policies.
Well, having these conversations, it went exactly as it has gone with me when I was an AP. And because you have to try not to call a spade, and to delicately, like Scott said, lead them to seeing what you're trying to see in the data. It took a lot. I need like 3 more parts of 6 minutes for me to get to where I wanted to get, because Nikki really tripled down. And I was just, it was really difficult.
That's funny. I was thinking I possibly wasn't as delicate as I could have been. Because I think immediately I heard like what was coming up from the teacher end of it was like what in my mind was a mindset concern. And so instead of trying to kind of work on that in the moment, which looking back now, I don't know if maybe I should have tried to do that in the moment. For me, what I wanted was more of a like directive. This is what needs to happen next, because the urgency is with the students and the grades and their improvement.
And I think I was pushing my own feelings about like, how do I extend empathy for this teacher? Because I could have got like, I was, heated about the data, but the teacher shared about how frustrating it was to like give assignments and kids lose them, and just like trying to have empathy for him. But I didn't ask him at any point. I think something didn't go as expected, is like, how does this data make you feel? And how does that like, and actually like teasing out the feelings as like an opportunity to build our relationship more. But violence starts with dehumanization. Dehumanization starts with language. Accountability also starts with language. Hate crime and domestic terrorism, and that is in regards to the shooting in Georgia. But I think one thing I'm just now realizing as I read this quote is I didn't bring up what teacher 2 said in that meeting. Like I never addressed that language in our conversation. And there's so many words that were problematic, and that was a missed opportunity for me.
Would have changed the question.
As you can see, our team is diverse in our approach and experience in having these types of conversations. And we also display vulnerability in our reflections that helps us create more authentic experiences for leaders. So as we shared earlier, we established a baseline around our personal and team equity culture using the personal team equity culture self-assessment survey in the fall. We labeled it as BOY, as you see there. Then we completed the middle of year assessment to kind of progress monitor our growth as an equity team. And as you can see, for the middle of year, our equity team demonstrated notable, measurable growth in 2 areas that were aligned to our equity improvement cycles that are highlighted there in purple. So as our equity team engaged in the short cycles of improvement, we were concurrently planning for the school leaders through our PLC. And so each was informing the other, right? So each meeting informed the next meeting according to whether leaders were able to accomplish the objectives and according to feedback that leaders shared. Next slide. So to expand our impact to school leaders and down to the student level, we focused on establishing professional learning communities where school leaders identified their focus for equity improvement, and they were placed in PLC with 4 to 6 other members with a similar focus. Each of the meetings contained their common learning across all PLCs, such as the role play we shared about earlier, as well as differentiated learning based on the PLC focus for the year. This learning happens through a professional text, as well as giving and receiving feedback of equity improvement using a consultancy protocol. Next slide. So when the school leaders completed the PTEC, also the self-assessment, they reflect on their instructional leadership and how the learning was taking place at their staff, at the staff level. And you can see here what was the increase that they reported from the MOY from BOY to MOY. And I don't know if we have time for this last video, but let's see. We're going to share a video of our equity team analyzing and reflecting on the middle of year data, both with our own and the N6 broader schools.
I noticed that in the beginning of the year, our scores looked very similar. And then at the middle of the year, our team had grown more than our leaders had grown. And that's what I suspect, because we've actually had more intense training.
How many different spaces do we talk about equity versus the amount of spaces and opportunities leaders have to talk about equity? And we may just have more opportunities.
Is part of why we see increased growth in our team, because we have this equity team. So we have this named time that we're focused on this work. Whereas at many school levels, they don't all have an equity team. And the question is, it's just naming it. Does that make people think that they're doing more, or it just reserves time to be doing more of the work? And is that the sustainable way to do the work, or is equity work folded into everything that you're doing? I
noticed.
Okay, thank you. So at the end of each of our equity team meetings, we always reflect on our work together by doing pluses and deltas, thinking about what worked well in our team meeting and how we worked together, and a delta is something we can improve upon in the future. So we went back and we looked at all of our team meeting notes, and we identified some of the trends in our pluses and deltas. Our pluses, we called out consistently that we always had time for reflection, that we collaborated and we shared ideas, that our work was actionable, that we used data to inform our work, and that we always remained in a learner stance as team members. And then opportunities for growth is that as we're learning how to collaborate in a virtual setting, that we decided that giving feedback on decks asynchronously would work for us. And then also we need to distribute responsibility more so across our team for creating learning for leaders. And as we wrap up our session, we hope that you've had an opportunity to think about your own equity team as you've heard about ours, and perhaps considered an adjustment that you might make to ensure your team is engaged in meaningful and ongoing learning. We're going to do something called a waterfall. And if you haven't done a waterfall yet, this is how it goes. Is I'm going to give you a prompt and you're going to start to type it in the chat, but you're not going to hit enter until I say so. So the prompt that we'd like you to think about is, I used to think blank, now I think blank when you think about your equity team. So I'll give everybody a minute to start typing in the chat, but remember, don't hit enter until I say so. Okay, you can go ahead and hit enter in the chat, and then a waterfall is going to happen in our chat, and you can go scroll back up and read what other participants in the breakout had to say. Hopefully what some of fellow participants said resonated with you as you read through these. We thank you so much for being here. Go to our next slide. Look at our timing, 90 seconds left. Beth, you want to close us up?
Yes, I do. Can everyone hear me? Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are, again, so grateful for you being here and for being in community with us. These are we shared our contact information on this slide in case you have questions that come up following this session and want to reach out, or just to connect and continue this great reflection around the equity work that all of us are doing. So thank you so much again. Thank you, Lee, for giving us this space, and the RIDES team for making this opportunity available for us. We appreciate it.
And thank you for both bringing your hearts, souls, and helping some people see that CPS isn't necessarily faceless bureaucrats, but actually real people. But also the point I saw, the real power of short cycles that are data rich, I think are powerful, because they let people know that we're learning and give people hope about improving. So good for you. Thank you, Bert, for sharing that.
And Lee, thank you for giving us that opportunity to learn from you.
That's my pleasure. See you in the big room in a moment.